Freshwater mussels are one of my favorite groups of animals to work with. A lot of people assume that they're really boring, just rocks with guts sitting on the bottom of the river. But when you put on a snorkel and take a closer look at what's actually going on with these animals, you just become fascinated with them. Most mussels are pretty sedentary as an adult. They don't move much, but we find mussels throughout the river system, both up and downstream. So how do these mussels disperse throughout a system? As it turns out, our native mussels have a unique life history that helps them disperse. The larvae, which we call glochidia, are actually parasites on a host fish. And the female mussel has developed some strategies to get those babies, those glochidia, onto a host fish. So she'll either pack her babies inside her body or into these conglutinate packages outside of her body. And these packages can look like a grub or a worm that might look like a tasty meal to a fish. Or sometimes she'll even modify her body tissue to look like a crayfish or a small fish that appeals to a bigger fish. So the fish comes in and bites the packages, thinking it's about to get a tasty snack. But the larvae, the glochidia, actually go out into the water column and then attach onto the fish's gills. The fish is not harmed during this process. The larvae aren't big enough. There's not enough of them to make a real difference for the fish. But the larvae will stay attached to the host fish for weeks as the fish goes about its daily life, swimming up or downstream, sometimes for miles, depending on the fish species. And then the larvae, once they've developed enough and can fend for themselves, will drop off of the fish back down onto the river bottom where they grow into adults. Now, after getting that free ride, the mussels actually give back to the fish that brought them there. Mussels are filter feeders. As water flows downstream, it's carrying a lot of suspended particles. Some of these are food sources for the mussel, like bacteria and algae, but some of these are actually things that we don't want in the system, like sediment or pollutants. The mussel is also filtering out those particles, and then it expels clean water back into the water column, so it improves the overall water quality for the fish, for the insects, and for the other mussels that are living in the stream. Clean water is great for people too, especially here in the Southeast, where a lot of our drinking water comes from our rivers and streams. And we don't just drink this water, we recreate on this water. So we do things like swim and fish and boat and even snorkel. So the rivers in the Coosa system are home to a really unique aquatic community. Many of our fish and mussel species actually aren't found anywhere else in the world. And so in Georgia, those rivers are the Conasauga River, which joins the Coosa Wati to form the Oostanala. And then the Oostanala joins the Etowah River in Rome, Georgia, to form the Coosa, which then flows down into Alabama. These rivers are diverse geologically, so they'll pass through the Blue Ridge, the Ridge and Valley, and the Piedmont ecoregions. Because of this, and because these areas were never glaciated during the last ice age, the Coosa River system is one of the most biologically diverse places for freshwater life in the whole country. Historically, the Coosa and its tributaries had about 42 different species of mussels. But unfortunately, for a number of reasons, both the abundance of mussels and the diversity of mussels has declined in this system. So today, we think there are about 36 species that still persist in the Coosa and its tributaries. And of those, 8 have federal protection, so they're either listed as threatened or endangered. This means that we've already lost about 20% of our mussel species, and experts believe that we're vulnerable to losing about 20% more. In the Coosa, many threats to our mussel species come from poorly managed agricultural, industrial, or residential practices, both now and in the past. So historically, there was a lot of logging and clearing land for cropland, for pastures, for development of cities. So farming is important because we all have to eat. I know I like to eat. But when we're clearing the land right up to the banks of the rivers, the result is a lot of erosion and sedimentation. Issues today include nutrient runoff from livestock, from improperly applied fertilizers and pesticides, and then also runoff from impervious surfaces like parking lots or building roofs. All of this runoff ends up in our waterways, and some of it does wash downstream, but some of it persists in our system, creating long-lasting impacts on water quality for the mussels and for us. Because mussels live at the interface between the water column and the substrate, They're some of the first species to be affected when water quality changes. So they're actually really good indicators of overall stream health. So some mussel species are more tolerant than others and can handle the changes to a point. But then some of our more sensitive species start to disappear, and with them no longer filtering, the water quality worsens. And eventually, some of our more tolerant mussel species, and even the fish that they depend on to complete their life cycle, start to disappear. It's really a cascading effect. One aspect of my job is to help restore rivers and their mussels. So the Georgia Department of Natural Resources partners with a number of organizations and individuals to help improve habitat and water quality. And by doing so, we're helping to restore, recover, and then monitor these mussel populations in the future. Partnerships are critical. So we're working with groups like the Nature Conservancy and private landowners to restore our native forest buffers along the rivers, and also to implement best management practices for things like livestock or cropland. These buffers are really important because they're preventing erosion and sedimentation from ending up back up in our streams. So it's really helping to improve water quality. So while this cooperative restoration work is going on, we're also evaluating the mussel community. So we'll go out into a river or stream, snorkel, collect all the mussels we find. We'll identify them, sometimes we'll tag them, we'll measure them, and then we'll put them back in the river system. And over time, this data can tell us not only where a species is occurring, but also if the population of that species is increasing or decreasing over time. Some species are so endangered that we are doing propagation and reintroduction projects. For example, we have this one species, the Coosa Moccasinshell, which is endemic to the Coosa system and is federally and state protected. It's critically endangered. So we are working with partners from Alabama, Tennessee, and the federal government to restore this species. Each year, we're really only able to collect a few individuals in the wild, and we'll take those back to a hatchery in Alabama. And then once they're successfully bred and grown into adults, we're looking for sites to restock them in their natural range. Only a couple of decades ago, several of these sites that we're considering might not have been suitable for Coosa Moccasinshell or really any other mussel species. But because of things like the Clean Water Act and voluntary actions that people have taken, we believe that habitat has improved enough in these sites to be able to sustain mussels again, including the Coosa Moccasinshell. One thing I appreciate about this job is that I get to go into work every day feeling like we're making a difference. We get to work with so many different individuals and organizations to help improve the quality and the resiliency of these ecosystems for everyone's benefit. At the end of the day, we all love the rivers and we all need the rivers. And if you love the rivers, you gotta love the mussels.